Hello everyone, this is Dr. Prashant and welcome back to my public health series. So in this video, I'll be briefly talking about qualitative research methodology. So to start with the introduction, qualitative research is a type of scientific research which typically includes data in the form of words instead of numbers. So these are some of the key points related to qualitative research. It is especially effective in obtaining culturally specific information about the values, opinions, behaviors, and social contexts of particular populations. It is inductive in nature, and the researcher generally explores meanings and insights in a given situation. Qualitative methods generally aim to understand the experiences and attitudes of patients, the community, or healthcare worker. So, when to use a qualitative research, we all know that qualitative methods aim to answer questions like what, how, or why of a phenomenon rather than how many or how much. So, this quantity, that is, how many or how much, is usually answered through the quantitative approach. So, if our aim is to understand how a community or individuals within the community perceive a particular issue, then we try to use the qualitative method. So, let's now see some of the important differences between quantitative and qualitative research. So, coming to quantitative research, it seeks to confirm hypotheses about phenomena, whereas qualitative research seeks to explore phenomena. We use highly structured methods such as questionnaires, surveys, and structured observation in case of quantitative research. But qualitative research, we use semi-structured methods such as in-depth interviews, focus group discussions, and participant observation. So quantitative research is to quantify variation, whereas qualitative research is to describe variation. So as already said, we use closed-ended questionnaires most commonly in quantitative research, and open-ended question format is used in the case of qualitative research. And coming to the data type, we use numerical data in case of quantitative research, whereas in qualitative it's textual data. And coming to study design, it's a stable study design in case of quantitative research, which is structured and predetermined, whereas qualitative research study design is flexible, evolving, and emergent. So quantitative research describe characteristics of a population, right? But qualitative research try to describe individual experiences and group norms. And coming to the data analysis, we use statistical analysis, which mostly deals with the numbers and frequencies in case of quantitative research. But in qualitative research, the analysis is interpretive analysis. So now let's look how qualitative research can complement quantitative data. For example, a qualitative phase of research might precede quantitative data collection in order to explore a new area, to generate hypotheses, or to help develop data collection instruments. And in turn, qualitative research might follow a quantitative phase of research in order to elucidate and explain the numbers or to probe the issues more in depth with a smaller number of individuals. So in either way, qualitative research and the quantitative data complement each other. So now coming to types of qualitative research, first is grounded theory. It is to establish and construct theory from systematically obtained and analyzed data. So it involves the generation of a theoretical framework through the observation of a study population. So it is an inductive approach to research where new theories are deduced from the data. So data is usually gathered and examined in repeated steps until theoretical saturation is reached. So what does it mean? It is a point at which more data provide no new insight into your new theory. A simple example, why and how an event occurs or why and how people behave in a certain way. Next is ethnography. It comes from the study of cultures and societies in anthropology and involves the researcher getting immersed in the participant's environment. So the researcher's aim is to immerse themselves into the research population and document behaviors, actions, and events through the lenses of someone involved in or within the population under study. So it helps gain a comprehensive understanding of a group's shared culture, traditions, and social dynamics through flexible research method of ethnography. So the written report of the research that the ethnographer produces after the research is called as ethnography. So next is phenomenological design. It is defined as the study of structures of consciousness as experienced from the first person perspective. So this design emphasizes people's subjective interpretations and experiences of the world. So in this case, the researcher attempts to understand and describe how the world appears to others without deduction, theory, or assumptions from other fields of study. It looks into the lived experiences of the participants and aims to explore why and how participants behaved in a certain way from their own perspective. So, in this approach, the ultimate source of all value and meaning is the lived experience of the participants. So, now coming to narrative design, it is a process of collecting and analyzing people's accounts in order to describe experiences and provide interpretations. So, narrative researchers work with small groups of participants to gather detailed and open-ended conversations. So this narrative research connects a series of events to tell a story, and it is usually from just one or two individuals. So it is a method that involves studying the features of a study and more recently the meaning of relationships between people within social, historical and cultural settings. Next is case study design, where the researcher explores in depth a program, an event, an activity, a process, or one or more individuals. So these case studies are often used to examine and reveal complicated medical conditions and social problems. So the researchers utilize case studies to explore social issues like drug addiction, prostitution, poverty, and unemployment. Now coming to action research, it is a developing process that combines theory and action. So it connects scientific knowledge with the knowledge already present in an organization, helping to solve real problems along with the people involved in that system. So it seeks action to improve practice and study the effects of action that was taken. Next is historical research. It is used to describe how and where the study started and how it is developed during time and where it stands at present. So it's not only to discover the events of the past, but also to relate these past happenings to the present and to the future. So it helps both researchers and readers to analyze the present events and realize future ones. And coming to the last one, that is content analysis, it is a detailed and systematic examination of the contents of a particular body of materials for the purpose of identifying patterns, themes, or biases. So, in simple words, it's analyzing written, verbal, or visual communication messages. So, now coming to types of sampling, first is typical case sampling, where we take cases that are average or typical of whatever phenomenon we are studying. Next is extreme or deviant case sampling. As the name suggests, extreme, we take unusual samples of the phenomenon we are studying, such as outstanding successes or failures, extremely poor people, or the very, very rich. It depends on what we are studying. So let's understand this with a very simple example. Interviewing men who do not beat their wives in a culture where wife abuse is culturally accepted. Next is maximum variation sampling, where we choose a wide range of examples from one extreme to other. So we might be able to identify common patterns that cut across the variations or understand what factors make one case results in X while another results in Y under the same conditions. So let's understand this with a very simple example. We might see that two children who started their school year at the same educational level and come from similar socioeconomic backgrounds perform very differently by the end of year. So one might be doing poorly and the other excelling. So when we look at into the reasons for these differences, we might find that it's because of the level of support they received at home for their studies. Next is homogeneous samples, where we choose people or cases that are largely similar. So this is often the choice when choosing a sample for focus group discussions, because we want people to feel at ease with each other and talk freely. Next is snowball sampling, which is very important. So in this sampling technique, we first choose people with certain characteristics who are willing to take part in a study and provide useful information on our topic. So after that, after interviewing them, we ask them to identify people like themselves for the study who we then interview. So this continues until we have interviewed as many people as we need to interview to reach saturation. A simple example, finding commercial sex workers to interview about experiences of childhood sexual abuse by getting cases referred through friendship networks. Next is purposive sampling, where we choose sample with an intention of representing certain characteristics. So there is a purpose of selecting this particular sample. So we then choose our cases randomly from that purposively chosen universe. So there are three types of sampling under this. One is convenience sampling, which is the least rigorous type of sampling, where selection is based on who is most accessible or who is most convenient to include in our sample. So next is judgment sampling. It is to select the most productive sample to answer the research questions by developing a framework of variables to guide the selection. And next is theoretical sampling. So it is theory driven rather than data driven. So in theoretical sampling, researchers choose participants or data based on how they will develop or refine a theory. Next is criterion sampling, where the purpose is to investigate in depth a particular type of a case and identify all sources of variation. A simple example, where we interview only abused women who have left their partners in order to better understand the variety of factors that motivate women to leave. The last one is the intensity sampling, which is to provide rich information from a few selected cases that manifest the phenomenon intensively but are not extreme cases. A simple example to understand this, where we interview survivors of date rape to understand how forced sex impacts women's sexuality. So now coming to qualitative data collection methods, it's mainly through narratives, which are stories in which the participant explain their understanding of the world. So some of the examples for these narratives include speaking or writing, diaries, journalistic works, audio and video tapes, etc. So the primary goal of qualitative data collection technique is to gather textual data for research and analysis such as thematic analysis. So these are some of the techniques for collecting qualitative data. First is through observations. So under that we can see participant observation where the researcher participates in the context or culture being studied. Next is direct observation. So in order to avoid influencing the observations, the researcher tries to be as unobtrusive as possible so that they are more impartial. Next is indirect observation, where the outcomes of a process, interaction, or actions are seen. A simple example, measuring the amount of plate waste left by students in a school cafeteria to determine whether a new food is acceptable to them. And now coming to next one, that is interviews. First is focus group interviews, where it is a very common technique where it involves a number of people being interviewed simultaneously. Next is structured interview, which frequently include closed-ended questions to which respondents can only answer yes or no. Next is unstructured interview, which is opposite to that of structured interview. So it is also called as informal interview. So this rely on open-ended questions where it invites a more in-depth response than a simple yes or no. Next is semi-structured interview. It combines both the structured and unstructured interviews. Next is personal interview. It is one-on-one conversation between interviewer and the interviewee that takes place in person. So these interviews are best option if you want to talk to someone one-on-one and tailor your questions to them. Next is phone interview, which is conducted over the phone and make gathering data simple. So the best choice if you want to gather data quickly without using a lot of resources. And next is online interview, where it includes surveys or programs for video chat. So the interviewers and the interviewees don't have to be present at the same time or place when using this type of data collection method. So you may be able to quickly gather information from a large number of subjects in this way. So now coming to focus groups, it is a type of research technique where a small group of participants are gathered to respond to questions in a controlled environment. So the group is chosen based on predetermined demographic characteristics. So the focus group moderators typically encourage participant interaction while watching the group to gain understanding of actual attitudes and viewpoints. Next is surveys. These are common way to collect data in variety of fields, and they are wise choice if you want to learn more about a group of people's traits, preferences, viewpoints, or beliefs. And the last one is secondary research. It is also known as desk research, where it uses data that has already been collected. So now let's look at some of the important differences between primary research and secondary research. So primary research is done on site and the collected data belongs to the researcher, whereas data gathered from prior studies is the basis for secondary research. And the primary research is based on raw data, whereas secondary research is built on well-proven, previously analyzed and filtered data. So the collected information in primary research is tailored to the needs of the researcher, whereas the data from secondary research may or may not meet a researcher's requirements. And to gather data in primary research, researchers are heavily invested in their work, whereas in secondary research, it is quicker and simpler than primary research. And primary research is costly and the data collection and analysis take a lot of time, whereas secondary research, the availability of data makes secondary research a very quick process to collect data. So now coming to different approaches of qualitative data analysis. First is content analysis, and we use content analysis to define and classify typical terms, expressions, and concepts in qualitative data. So example for content analysis, to determine the language used in description of therapeutic apps. Next is thematic analysis. It is to locate, recognize, and interpret themes and patterns in qualitative data. Example, to investigate how tourism affects self-identity. Next is textual analysis. It is used to analyze the composition, organization, and design of text. Example, to comprehend how celebrity news coverage has changed over the past 10 years. And the last is discourse analysis. It is used to research communication and how language functions in different contexts to produce different effects. Example, to investigate how candidates build support during campaigns. So now coming to the tools to analyze qualitative data, it's basically done through computer assisted qualitative data analysis softwares. And these are some of the softwares. First is MaxQDA. So it is a tool for analyzing data using mixed qualitative and quantitative methods. Next is NVO. It enables users to prepare and store qualitative data for analysis. So Word documents, PDFs, audio visual files, and all these things can be imported in the software. The next one is Atlas TI. So it is a software tool where large scale collections of textual, graphical, audio, and video data can be analyzed. So till now, whatever I have explained under the qualitative research methodology, I will try to show those terms in a research paper so that it will be easy for you to differentiate quantitative and qualitative research. So I took this example of an article, Staying Alive with Antiretroviral Therapy. But it was very clearly mentioned in the title itself, a grounded theory study of people living in HIV in Peru. So whenever you see the term grounded theory, it's very evident, right? The study is a qualitative type of research. So first we will look at the sampling technique. So it was very clearly mentioned theoretical sampling, so which we have already discussed. And coming to the study design, so they have mentioned grounded theory approach was used. And the data collection was done through interviews. And let's look at the data analysis also. So they have used the software Atlas TI, right? So I hope it's very clear now. And if you are having any queries, you can post it in the comment section. Thank you.